Thank you, Jenny. We got it. Recording is in progress. Hi, Mickey. Hi, Lynn.
Hi. That's your co-op, by the way.
Baruch T.A., thanks so much. David Ross came to me and showed me his machzor that showed the translation of Unatan Tokif in the way that I said that I think most of us read it. It says that tshuva and tefillah and tzedakah can annul the decree, even though the Hebrew didn't support said reading. That's what the English said, which was great.
Well, I found your sermon yesterday quite powerful. It really gave me a new spin on it, and actually I was thinking about it as I was trying to go to sleep. It really made quite an impression on me.
Hi, Pauline.
Sorry, I'm late. Having trouble connecting.
You're right on time. Thank you so much for your tips for the city. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome, Rabbi.
I'm gonna share my screen, okay? Hi, Adam. I hope this works. Sometimes it works for me and sometimes it doesn't. It's gonna work today. You can see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Everybody can see. Let me make sure I can see you while you can see my screen, because I see 4 of you now, but I want to see more than 4 of you. Okay, now I see many of us. Nice. Oh, hey, Harvey. Nice to see you. Oh, hi. It's nice to see you yesterday in 3D. I brought us a text that I think will be fun for us. And I hope we can play out of it some deeper meaning for Rosh Hashanah and these 10 days of awe. I don't know if you have studied these texts before, but I wanted to share it. This is from the Talmud and Ta'anit, 20a and b. It starts on 20a and ends in 20b. This is a story that is about Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon. So let's take a moment to understand who that is. On my interview weekend or something, do you have a weekend? My Zoom weekend, my Zoom, whatever. When I was asked to teach, I taught one of the texts that matters most to me, which is the text of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai in the cave. Was anyone with me on that one? I don't remember who was where. But anyways, this Rabbi Shimon, anybody know that text? Okay. Like, you're right, he goes into the Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, the Rashbi. He's one of our, the way he's used kind of in our mythology is he's one of the grandfathers of our mystical tradition, that he went into a cave for 12 years to hide from Roman persecution. He comes out, he was supposed to have learned all the Torah secrets in the world in this cave. And he comes out and he kind of destroys the world. He sees people doing regular things, gets really angry about that. Like, look, they're not studying Torah. And then has to go back in the cave for another year and then comes out and says, wow, God's world is beautiful. Right? This rabbi, what we're told is when Rabbi Rashbi was in the cave, he's in there with his son. Right? That's this cat, Rabbi Elazar ben Shimon and Rabbi Shimon. This is the son that was with him in this cave for 13 years. And here's the story that we know. We know a Maaseh, Sheba Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, B'migdal Gedor Mebeit Rabbo. We know an incident. A Maaseh is a story, right? The story of when Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, came from Migdal Gedor, from his rabbi's house. Right? So he was over there. He was with his rabbi and he was learning. This is the only place I think ever that we get this name Migdal Gedor. Migdal is a tower. A Gedor is a fence. So a tower fence, a fence tower. I don't know what that means. But we know that he was coming home from his rabbi's house. He was riding on a donkey and strolling on the bank of a river. And he was very happy. And his head was very swollen with pride because he had studied so much Torah. Right? If you look in the Hebrew says Husamach simcha gdola. He was happy big. That's what it says. He was happy big. And he was A gas is a Hebrew word that means almost like conceited or rude, right? His head was so full because he had learned all of this Torah at his rabbi's house. Right? We're all good? Riding on the donkey, bank of the river, just with his rabbi. This is the son of the great mystic that got all the secrets, right? And then we're told that the story goes on, and it says, "Nizdamen lo adam echad shahaya mechuar biyoter." That he happened to come as he's riding his donkey, feeling so proud of himself and all the Torah that he learned. He happened upon an exceedingly ugly person, and that person, this person that he happened upon, says, "Shalom alecha, Rabbi." Says, "Greetings to you. May peace be upon you, my rabbi." And Rabbi Eliezer didn't return his greeting. He didn't say anything back to him. And he finally looks up and he calls him Reka. Reka is like an empty one, worthless one. He says, "How ugly are you?" And he asks him, "Are everyone in your town as ugly as you are?" Okay. The man said to him, "I don't know, but you should go ask the craftsman who made me and say, how ugly is the vessel that you made?" All right, somebody say what happened in English. Like in regular English, what's going on?
Will you pull down or scroll up so we can see?
Oh, you can't see?
No, you stopped at the Hebrew.
Oh, on mine I can see. I thought that meant you could see.
Yeah.
If I move it over here and go in here, can you see now?
There we go.
Oh, beautiful. Okay, thank you for telling me. Anyone want to take a crack? What's going on? This guy's the rabbi that's so smart and learned everything.
Does not know how to take care of how to react with other people.
So, Pauline, you're saying that he doesn't know how to react with other people, meaning what, like basic small talk? He doesn't know how to do that.
Well, worse than worse than small talk for him to be that rude to this person.
Yeah, and the word, Pauline, that they use for that he was feeling like full of himself is actually rude. Like he was rude. That's what he was with himself. Like his head's all swollen, right? But it's so swollen that he's rude. That's what he is. So one would have to question the greatness of this rabbi that is supposed to have learned so much Torah and is so much happy, and so happy about all that time with this rabbi, that he doesn't know how to function with just regular people that say, "Hi, Pauline." Like, right? He doesn't know how to do that.
Yeah.
Right. First, it kind of ignores you, and then, or ignores the person, and then afterwards insults them. That's what he does. What do you make of the response by the townsperson?
I'm impressed. But I really wonder who the craftsman is.
Well, what do you think that means? What is the townsperson saying to this rabbi who says, "How is everyone as ugly as you?" And then he says, "Well, why don't you go ask the one that made me?"
Mm-hmm.
What's he saying to do?
Speak to God.
Yeah, he's saying go speak to God, right? He's gonna go say, if you this is how, like, you're the great rabbi. And by the way, when rabbis wandered through your town, it was a huge deal. Like, right, they weren't wandering through all the time. They're in the north of Israel. Rabbis were kind of rare at this day and age. Like, rabbinic Judaism is just in formation, and you have someone that's learned that comes through. Usually what happens on those things is the city comes out, takes care of them, takes them in, feeds them, and then the rabbi teaches and shares stories and things like that, right? Tries to uplift the spirit of the people. And this dude, like, is so happy about his all of his learning and how wonderful he is that he just insults them. And then this person, the Reka, the worthless person, says to him, "I don't know, maybe you should check in with God," right? Maybe you should check in with God. Ask God about these ugly things that you made, right? All right. So now, to Rabbi Eliezer's credit, he had a moment that wasn't so graceful, right? So he says, when Rabbi Eliezer realized that he had sinned and insulted this man merely on account of his appearance, he descended from his donkey, prostrated himself before him, and he said, "I've sinned against you, please forgive me." Okay, so he got it. right? He was so full of himself. He was preoccupied. He was thinking about his learning or what he was going to teach when he gets home, or I don't know what he was going to do, right? But he was one of the words in the tradition is tarud. Tarud is my mind is occupied. It's actually almost kind of like torn. My mind is being torn by ideas and I'm not seeing the world right in front of me. So, all right, he had this less graceful moment, but he realized it. He comes off of his donkey. He prostrates himself like all the way down like we did today with the Elenu. And he says, I sinned against you, please forgive me. Right? The craftsman, the guy, the townsperson said, no, I won't forgive you until you go and ask the craftsman who made me, how ugly is the vessel that you made? Okay. So what do you make of the last bit?
I would say, sorry.
Yeah, go.
I would say that you said that you go to Hashem, and because Hashem is the craftsman, and you say that this person is ugly. I don't know anybody who would be brave enough to do that.
So in the world of tshuva, right? In the world of tshuva, if I've committed some wrong against you, or you've committed some wrong against me, the way that we repair that is by me to go to you and say, sorry, will you please forgive me? Doesn't that seem like what Reb Elazar has done?
Yes.
Doesn't it seem like it? Right? But this townsperson, through his response, is saying, no, I can't forgive you. You got to go to the person that you've actually insulted. And who's the one that he's actually insulted? It's not me. That townsperson's fine. Like, this guy was just rude, right? But who is he ultimately insulting? Not a sin against the townsperson. It was a sin against the one that made him. So when the sin that I've committed is against God, what do I have to do? Right? I can't go to Shoshana and say, hey, God, forgive me. I mean, maybe you're God, Shoshana, I don't know, right? But I can't do that. Then I got to go to God and say, I'm sorry, I fell short. I did this thing. So there's something subtle in the townsperson's remark in saying, you actually didn't really insult me, right? You insulted the creator of the universe that made humans that look like all different kind of things, right? This is how I'm made. What do you mean? Like, right? So, and here I want to pause before we go to the rest of the story and see what happens. But I wonder, like, well, what do you think, Rebbe Elliot? What happens to Reb Elazar that all he sees is the outward appearance of this guy? Right? All he sees is an exterior. And then think about what Jewish communal life looks like, or community life looks like. Maybe not even only Jewish. And then where is it that sometimes we're falling short by reacting to only appearance? Like, do you have any experiences or anything like that?
I would say, Rabbi, very often people tend to do as the rabbi had done.
Oh, so that's one of the real dangers, Colleen, right? The real dangers in this is that most often, I would guess, in our lives, most often, we learn by watching rather than like reading a instruction manual or something, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you didn't get the Oregon driver's code and read all those thousands of pages to learn how to drive, right? You sat in a car for a long time and you watched how people did it, and then you did a little bit of study and then you figured it out. And besides most technical parts of our lives, that's how we learn. We learn by watching. So, Pauline, you might be surprised to know that there's another section of the Talmud that says, what is the worst sin that one could commit? The very, very, very worst, the worst of the worst. What's the worst of the worst? And we would come up with a pretty good list of the worst, right? Like horrible things we would put on there, and murder and stuff with kids, and like we would put on terrible things. Mm-hmm. The Talmud says the worst of the worst is when the rabbi goes into the butcher and takes meat without paying for it.
Oh.
That's the worst of the worst, right? Why? Because it's like using, like what happens when a community watches what they see as a representative of the tradition, get favors, be treated extra, not pay their bill, right? Then it corrupts like the kind of spiritual DNA of a community. And that for the rabbis, right, is ultimately really dangerous, right? Really dangerous. Obviously, those other things are really horrible, but they're saying you want to see what might undermine the whole community. It's when we start to eat at the actual skeleton of this thing. And if we can't come to trust the people that are supposed to stand in leadership, then, right, then things fall apart. Look, we've seen this in our own country, right, where we can't, nobody seems to be able to trust any side about anything. And then what happens, right? It's dangerous, right? It becomes dangerous in a different way. But let's think about appearance, just about appearance. So look, do you know this word? I think I've shared it a couple times, but there's this word Ashkenormative. You know what Ashkenormative is? So Ashkenazi, right? That means from our Jewish ancestors that came from parts of Europe and Russia. And those folks that came from Poland and Russia and Kiev and maybe Austria and Western Europe, those kind of people, they tend to look a certain way and to certain kind of act a certain way, or have a certain way of speaking, even some of them. And then we hold that up as like, that's what Jewish life is, right? There's a lot written on like our Jews white people, because, you know, half of us come from North Africa lands and throughout the Middle East, that they don't look like that at all. And they didn't have that history, like the Jews that grew up in Spain and Northern Africa and in Baghdad and in Yemen and in Tehran, honestly, right? They just look different and have a really different history and a really different starting point, and they speak a little bit different. So there's a way when you'll get, like I might get sometimes, I don't look Jewish, like you don't look Jewish, just on appearance, right? You don't look Jewish. Or my little blonde kids, they say you don't look Jewish. I'm just helping the gene, you know, it's fine. But that can be really painful, right? I mean, I had few women that were working with me at Hillel, both adopted from China. One was the regional president of BBYO, like, right? She was super like committed Jewish person, really talented and had a great education. And yet every time in community, she had to come out as being Jewish. Like they just assume, you would just assume she's not because she looks like that. I heard a story here locally. Someone shared a story with me just before the Chagim that that because of their features, they came into a synagogue that they told them the church is across the street. Oh. Right? So you just think about like, what does it mean? And especially in our world where the Jewish community looks like everything. Like, how do we interact with the person? And what's our first thought? Like, I don't know, Rabbi Elazar's first thought is this guy's ugly. He doesn't see anything past superficial, right? He can't see. That's all he sees. He didn't see, he didn't ask a question, he didn't greet him, he didn't do anything. And I think there's danger in that. And that some of our falling short during the year comes from us reacting on this kind of superficial exterior level only. I just know that even working with a few B'nai Mitzvah families already here, like, what does Jewish family look like? It looks like a lot of things now, right? It is not like this kind of American image of 2 adults and 2 kids and 2.2 children and a dog and a cat and a picket fence in the suburb. That's not it, right? It looks like all kinds of stuff now. That's what it looks like. And so I think it behooves us to like at least take the warning of the text to say what happens when I'm just seeing the surface level of people, right? Just the surface level of people. And that can immediately lead me to a kind of dangerous place. You want to see what happens in our story?
Yes, please.
Okay, so Rabbi Elazar, sorry, his name's not Eliezer, Elazar. He didn't stop that, you know, he got off the donkey. He tries to tries to get the guy to forgive him, and he says no. Pardon me. And he says no. So Rabbi Eliezer chose to walk behind this man. So they're walking towards the city, and he's following him the whole way and trying to appease him until they reached the city, right? The people of the city came out to greet him, saying to him, "Greetings to you." Where does it say in the Hebrew? It says, "Shalom alecha, Rabbi, Rabbi, Mori, Mori." It says, "Greetings to you, my rabbi, my rabbi, my master, my master." So you can imagine like the triumphant Rav returned home, walking his donkey, and all the people said, "Yeah, he's back." I'm not sure that ever happened in history, but fine, it's fine. Right, but you got it, right? They all come out to greet him. And now this guy that he insulted says, they said to him, to this man who is walking behind you. And he said to them, "If this man is a rabbi, may there be not many like him among the Jewish people." Okay, I don't even know if I spoke English right then. So what happened? Someone say it again so I know we are all on the same page. Walks behind him, trying to appease him. They come into the town. Everybody says, "Yay, rabbi." Then what happens?
This is not a good example of a rabbi.
If that's the dude, this guy you're talking about, if that guy's the rabbi, what do you think of his exact words? He says, "If that guy's the rabbi," what does he say? He says, may there not be many like him amongst the Jewish people." What did you say? Oh, my daughter said gross. That's the kind of comment it is. Right? Like if that's the blessing that we got, let's have less blessings, right? That's kind of what he does. And he says that, and they asked him, right? The townspeople asked the townsmen, the one that was called ugly, "Why are you saying this?" And he said to them, "That guy did this and this to me. That guy did such and such to me. That guy said, I'm ugly, and are all my other townspeople ugly too?" And then the group of people said to him, "Even so, forgive him, as he's a great Torah scholar." All right. Questions or comments or concerns?
How would they know that? How would the townspeople know that the person who was walking behind the gentleman who had been spoken to rudely is this famous rabbi? They didn't have newspapers or announcements that went out from city to city then, one would think.
Yeah, there's it's a really good question, right? So one, and it's not clear from the text. Let's just say it's not even clear what city they're going to. It's a bit like you see in the text that's up on the screen, it says he walked behind the man trying to appease him. Who's the he that walked behind what? Who's trying to appease him, right? The pronouns get all mixed up and who's actually doing what to whom. And then until they reached whose city. So one answer, and the answer that this text gives, is that they came actually to the city of Reb Elazar, and that's why they knew who he was. Right? They just knew him because that's where he lived. Another answer that you will find other places.
I missed that.
Oh, it's not in there. That's why you missed it. You didn't miss anything because it's just not clear. Another answer that you'll get in other parts of the text is his donkey was probably loaded up with a certain amount of accoutrement, that he was dressed a certain way, right? I wore that funny white robe today, and you know what I mean? You get dressed up in a certain way, and then you look like a certain thing, or you're representing yourself like a certain thing, or yeah, to keep on his head, or we could imagine ways that he would identify himself.
Sure.
And the folks in this time would have been used to kind of some rabbinic scholars traveling. They would have known that these folks move around, right? But it's a good question. How would they know, right? I don't know how they would know. And if you read this text in one way, when they say my rabbi, my master, and there are some commentaries that want to read it this way, that the people were confused, and they actually thought that the The guy that was insulted was the rabbi, because he was walking in front and the donkey was with him. And then this other guy was behind, right? So why would the great rabbi be following behind us, just the regular guy, right? It should be the other way around in the rabbinic mind, it should be the other way around. So look, I think it's a good question to say, how would they know, right? How would they know? But in the end, the guy that was insulted makes it clear. Who? This guy? This guy? This guy? This guy? This is the one you're saying, Rabbi, Marie, that one? That guy's a joke, right? We don't need more of him. And then what do you make of the townspeople's response? Okay, he had a moment, right? He wasn't nice to you, but he's asking you for forgiveness. Look, he's schlepping behind you all this way. He's lowered himself to the ground. He's trying. Just forgive him. What do you make about that piece?
They weren't there to have heard and seen the exchange between the two of them. So in some respect, they are not necessarily belittling the person who had been talked to rudely, but in their study or their daily lives, they would feel that it was important, no matter what had happened to you, to forgive the person who was rude.
Right. So I appreciate that, Pauline, because we don't know, and this is one of the fun or the challenges of text is, right, when he said to them, the townsperson said, he did such and such to me. And they said to him, even so, forgive him. We don't know how much time passed in between those two things, right? So on one way, if it's immediate, just like it's written, then they kind of did the same thing that the rabbi did to him, right? They also kind of just saw him as invisible. They also didn't ask any follow-up questions. They didn't say, and how are you feeling now? They didn't say, oh, that's terrible, and affirm him. They didn't say, they didn't do anything that would have recognized that the guy was in some kind of, pain or some kind of discomfort. They didn't do any of that. They just said, and maybe you're right, Pauline, that they needed the rabbi to function like the rabbi. And so just put your stuff aside and make this okay, because when you make it okay, it's going to be okay for all of us. And we don't like this. We don't like this tension that's sitting here between us. Or we don't like that he's following behind you. We don't like, right? We don't like. I think that there is something in that. We could imagine that there is more time in between those two sentences. And then what might, like we could fill in that section, right? If we imagine that there was more time between he said such and such, and then they said, what might have happened in between there that got them to the point that said, even so. Right? Maybe they were listening. Maybe they were kind. Maybe they were doing that stuff. But as it's written, I think your read is very valid. Hi, Daniel. Daniel, was that a hand or not a hand?
Yeah, that was a hand, sorry. I'm thinking as I read this, that the woodcutter or whoever it was that was the insulted party, he's been very careful and very kind in his speech toward the rabbi. If I were directly insulted by a person, I would not be inclined to speak so kindly and gently to that person who had insulted me.
So what part do you hear as kind? Explain to us the kind.
Rather than this rabbi Elazar calls me ugly.
Yeah. He would never.
I'm a rather base fellow. I'd probably tell a rabbi that something about something obscene about himself and his donkey or whatever. I don't know what I would say in such a.
Yeah.
I'd probably escalate the situation, and yet this insulted person, in every way, speaks gently to Rabbi Elazar, reminding him of a proper way of speech with a fellow human.
Yeah.
And a stranger.
Yeah, there's a way, Daniel, that I think we can read him. as actually like hitting him where it hurts. Right? You don't have to raise your voice to like escalate it. You don't got to do that, right? Like he actually, you're just supposed to be this God guy. So like you should take this up with God, right? Like just where it hurts the most, you know? Like it would be too easy for me to say, oh, it's fine. Like, like I don't know. But I hear what you're saying. He doesn't curse at him, he doesn't yell at him, he doesn't say, oh, and that's the ugliest donkey I've ever seen. You know, he doesn't do that. He just, his words are poignant, right? It's actually focused. They're really to the point, right? To say, oh yeah, take that up with God. I mean, look, what does it mean to look at the outside of someone and say you're ugly, right? I mean, really, what it really is saying is that's all I can, that's what I see, and that's what I'm judging, and that has value and all of that, where I don't know that we're going to find a lot of Torah sources. This is the guy that's full of Torah, right? Head so big, full of Torah. I don't know if I'm going to find a lot of Torah sources that says, you know what makes a good human? The ones that are pretty. Like, we're not going to find those sources. So this guy should know better, right? This guy should know better. So I hear you. I hear you, because it doesn't say that, but I do think there's some sting in his words, right? I do think. Was that Mickey? Hi, Mickey.
Yeah, I agree. I think there was sting in his words, but what's been in my mind throughout this whole story is from Pirkei Avot, don't al tistakel b'kankan, you can't judge a book by its cover.
Right.
So this is directly against black letter law.
And it wasn't serious Talmud, Mickey. It was Pirkei Avot. All the rabbis should know Pirkei Avot, right? Like, this is not like getting into the weeds. This is like basic stuff, man, right? Like, yeah, don't judge the vessel, right? Don't, the kankan, as you said, don't judge the vessel. Because I could look at that story that Mickey's referencing is, I could look at a beautiful, like a decanter or a vase, and inside that liquid could be horrible, or I could look at something made out of earthenware and it could have the most like sweetest wine in the world in it. I don't know, like by the vessel. I only care about what the liquid is inside. And that's the Jewish way to say don't judge a book by its cover. By the way, can you see this book? This is my friend and artist, Jessica Peach. This is her graphic novel of Pirkei Avot. This is what I'm teaching 8th graders this year. But it's really fun way to learn Pirkei Avot. It's like all crazy. But this is the stuff that we should, I don't know, this is kind of the basics, Mickey. This isn't like this guy learned so much Torah and he kind of forgot the basics. By the way, can that happen? Yeah. I can get so into the weeds of like the minutia of some argument that I forgot like the core things. Yeah, I can do that, right? So I hear you like saying that he should have known this. He should have known this thing. Townspeople say, forgive him. Okay, right? Just forgive him. Let's see what he says. So the guy that was insulted says, for your sakes, you townspeople, I'll forgive him, provided that he not become accustomed to behave like this. All right. Daniel shook his head. Mickey disappeared. What kind of answer is that?
He should learn from his mistake.
Yeah. Right. I mean, I think that's the simplest way to read it, is to say he should learn from his mistake. Like, I've tried to think about how would this sound if it was like in a regular conversation today. All right, I'll forgive him, but as long as, I mean, your way might be the right way to learn from, like, this doesn't become I don't know. It's a weird thing to say, as long as he doesn't become accustomed to behaving like this. Learn from his mistakes. Well, Daniel, what does he do? Did he learn? Because immediately Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, entered the study hall and taught the Persian should always be soft like a reed and should not be stiff like a cedar, as one who is proud like a cedar is likely to sin. And therefore, due to its gentle qualities, the reed merited that a quill is taken from it to write with it the Torah scroll, phylacteries, and mizvot.
Oh my.
Who said that? Who was the oh my?
Pauline.
Pauline, you said the oh my. I'm always looking for whose lips are moving. What's your oh my?
Well, that just has a beautiful feeling to what it is that's written.
So what part? He said, right? Rabbi Eliezer goes into the study hall. He goes into the Beit Midrash. He does not say, let me tell you a story about when I was very rude and I insulted a guy because I was being so proud, right? I was overcome with pride. My hubris was really high. He doesn't say that. He goes in and he says, a person should be soft like a reed and should not be stiff like a cedar. Because the cedar, he says, represents pride. And if one is stiff like that, it will lead you to improper behavior. But if you're gentle, right? If you're gentle, you're less likely to sin. You're more likely to see the humanity of the person, right, that you're encountering. You're more likely to see beyond the surface level of something. And because of that reason, those gentle qualities, that's why the reed becomes the quill that we can use to make, right, a Torah, mezuzah, and tefillin.
And my oh my really related to the ending of the fact that the reed became the quill to do this very special writing.
So say that again. So gentle things create Torah, right?
They surely could.
Gentle things can create a Torah scroll. Can create, there's another scroll inside of my tefillin and another scroll inside of my mezuzah. By mezuzah, we don't mean the box, and by tefillin, we don't need the box. We mean the scrolls that are inside. Right. And what do all those do? What does the Torah scroll and the tefillin scroll and the mezuzah scroll do? What are they meant to do? So I take words of Torah and I put them on something, and then I put them in something, and then I put them in front of my face, right?
Teach us how to live.
Like remind me again and again. Yeah, right. Remind me again and again and again. When I see my mezuzah on my door, I'm supposed to be reminded who I am, right? Right. I'm supposed to be reminded of Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha v'chol me'odecha. Right, that there is one God. That's our God. And that God asked me to love God with all my heart, all my soul, and all my might. That's in all three of them, written every single one over and over again, right? So if you're there's something about what he says is softness, right? Softness that allows Torah to come into creation, that allows it to be, that allows it to sustain, that allows it to stand, right? But if we get really stiff and rigid, he says pride here, but if we become very stiff, I think even in the world of Torah, sometimes it can't live, it can't stand, it becomes too, well, the word in the text is gas, it becomes too firm and too rigid and too rude, it becomes oppressive in some way. And that, and that it doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't call me into being who I could be. So I liked your reaction. That was a good one reaction because any other thoughts or questions or concerns? David?
Well, what I like is that the forgiveness, if you will, is predicated upon a recognition and an acknowledgement, and indirectly a confession of wrongdoing. I want to bring up something that I think is relevant. You may remember that horrible incident, I think it was in South Carolina, where a church was shot up.
Yep.
How many were killed? But there was this was on NPR, there was a story about how many people in the church congregation immediately said they forgave the shooter in accord with concepts of Christian charity.
Yeah.
And I thought that was completely inappropriate. And even today, the perpetrator has no regrets about what he did. So to forgive somebody for doing something which the malefactor doesn't recognize as wrong, I think is pointless. And I like what happens here because there is no forgiveness until there's an acknowledgement.
Yeah, look, I want to say, David, you're holding up Jewish values versus that some Christian communities' understandings of those values, right? Like, so our values are pretty clear. Like, right, when we're in the world of tshuva and forgiveness, you have to take accountability, right? You have to own what you've done. You have to make amends, right? He chases after him, trying to appease him all of this time. It didn't happen like this, right? It was a journey for them together. And then he did, and I like how you said it, like he did make a public acknowledgement, because if we read him with some grace, if we read the text with some grace, imagine this all happened within like a 15-minute period, right? They come in, they say, oh, Rabbi, he says, that guy, he's a joke. They said, why are you saying such a thing about that rabbi? He's like, that guy did this stuff to me. They said, even so, right? Even so, you should forgive him. The rabbi, he says, all right, I could forgive him if he learned from it and he, you know, if he wouldn't do this anymore. The rabbi gets up and says, look, everything that guy said is true. And you know what I learned from all this? That we should be soft like the reed and not stiff like the cedar. Because when I was full of pride and gas, then look what I did. And I really got to be careful about not doing that. Right. So you're right. And some of that stuff for me is similar, David, that it rubs me kind of a strange way, because we don't have that same concept of turn the other cheek necessarily. Right. We have a concept that says we could maybe turn the other cheek once you recognize you've done something wrong and once you've tried very hard to make amends. And by the way, in the laws of tshuva, for his friends to say, forgive the guy, look how hard he tried, like, right? He didn't mean it. He made a bad mistake. He's been following you. He's asked for forgiveness all this time. That's actually straight out of the Rambam. The Rambam says that, you know, like we should be quick to forgive. Like, right, once somebody shows up with contrition and is taking accountability, we should forgive. Like, after that, the only one it hurts is me, right? It doesn't hurt anyone else. So it's just different that way. And this text is a kind of an example of that. And I think you're right to point that out, that he gets up in the study hall, in his place, in his environment where he has all the power, and he doesn't say that kid's a jerk, right? He says, how dare he blaspheme me? He says, no, he was right, right? And we should be soft like that. And then it's a nice poetic twist that they say, right? When you're soft like the reed, you can write a Torah scroll. You become the kulmus is a nice, it's the Greek word for quill. The kulmus, so you know that we got some Greek thought in our Talmud, where we can become the quill that can actually write Torah and make it permanent and have power and influence. Was there any other hand? I think there was another one, but I might have talked too much.
I have a question. This is Pauline again.
Yeah.
To ask, I'm troubled by the stiffness of the cedar.
Yep.
And that it's connected to sinning. Mm-hmm. When cedar, in my mind, and somewhere in the writing, has always been a tree to plant and be proud that you have someone who should receive this tree in his honor or her honor.
Yeah. On
special occasions. So to have it described like this is of concern to me.
Thank you. You're right. You're right, by the way, Pauline, that when we say, you know, tzaddik tamar, yifrach, we say, may you be planted like a cedar in the plains of Lebanon, right? Mm-hmm. That's what we say, because there's something permanent and strong in that cedar, right? Super strong in that cedar. We have other texts that say, what happens when, like, I don't want to use this. What happens when, well, I was going to say a hurricane, but it's a bad time to have hurricanes. What happens when a big storm blows through, that the cedars actually break and snap, but the reeds like blow over, mm-hmm. and then they stand back up, mm-hmm. right? So we have other places where they juxtapose these two ideas, the one that is very strong and solid, and then the one that has a lot more flexibility in it. So I do want to point one thing. In the Hebrew, it says no such thing as sin, right? The Hebrew says, Rabbi Shimon got up, the darash, he gave a drasha, he gave a drash is the central word of the Torah, and it means to seek, right? It means to seek out. So every time somebody gets up to give a davar Torah, they give a drasha, they give a seeking. They're trying to find meaning in the text, right? So Rabbi Shimon, darash leolam yeh adam rach, he said, people should always be soft like the reed, and don't be velo ieh, and don't be kashe ke'eres, and don't be stiff like the cedar. And then he says, and then it says, therefore, the reed merited to be the quill. It doesn't have the word sin in it, right? The commentator here actually is adding those words in to tie it back to the earlier story, but it's not actually there. And if Reb Elazar said that, he's commenting about himself. He's saying my pride, my gasness, my rudeness came out of being stiff. How would you say it better? Like what do you think he's saying? Because he's saying, when I was stiff, I didn't see this guy. I insulted him. I was mean to him. I looked at only an appearance. But if I'm softer, then I see beyond that. What do you think he's really saying?
Prideful.
I mean, I think pride is where the text takes us, because why was his head so full, and why was he happy big, right? Why was he like samech simcha gdola at the beginning? Like, I don't know, like you learned some Torah, that's great, but why were you so happy? I don't know, like, I guess, right? I guess, but it's not words that we normally see together. Like, we just don't see them like that. So maybe pride. When I'm full of my own pride, then the Torah gets squashed, and the Torah inside of you gets squashed, and the Torah inside of me gets all shmutzi, something like that, right? So you pointed out that, and just know that word sin is actually not there, and the translator here, that's not me. This is from Sefaria, which is a great easy way to pull up text. That's added there.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any last comments or questions or concerns or anything like that? Yeah, Daniel.
Sorry, it took me a second to find the mute button. Just a little distraction from the lesson. This may be an Ashken normative thing, bringing it back to that statement, but the Sofer Stam today uses a feather and not a reed.
It's a good question. I mean, I don't know.
Maybe a change in custom over the years.
But there's probably I just don't want to tell you something that I don't know for sure is true. But I would guess, if I'm guessing, that there's more than one acceptable thing one can make a quill from. The big general rule with anything that goes into making sacred texts, a scroll or anything, is it cannot be any material that could be used in warfare, right? So the image that came to my mind when you said that is, could I have a big battering ram, like when they had like a bunch of guys with a big tree on each side, and they would just break down a gate to a big city. You know what I'm talking about? Like they would just create. So like even with the Torah scroll itself, right? We can use softwoods, and I don't know what this means, so I'm going to say something I don't know what I'm talking about, but I've read that we could use softwoods and not hardwoods. I don't know the difference. I don't know anything about wood, but I've read that. And then even the metals that we use for like a yad or something like that all have to be precious. They can't be still or common metals or things like that, even though I've seen some artisans make yads out of steel and iron and stuff like that. But then they're pretty. They're art, right? They're not but they're not a bullet casing or something like that. So I don't know enough to know what are all the proper quills, but it's a good question to say, why is it that we're using a feather? It's probably a better quill, practically speaking. I don't know the right answer, but I could find out. If you're really interested, we could look it up. you'll give me something to do and I can't sleep. I'm gonna start looking up quills. What are all the halachic quills that we could have? This is how you find out. This is how you like go down the rabbit hole, right? This is how I learn half the stuff I know. Exactly that. And it's better than the YouTube rabbit hole where I end up looking at terrible things. So, right. Any last comments or questions? I brought you the text for a few reasons, right? One is I think there is something about looking, like Mickey was saying, like, are we actually working actively to see beyond the, the surface level? Are we doing that? Because there are times when I shoot myself in the foot by doing that. And I know enough about Jewish communal life now to know that it just looks different than a generation or two ago, and we can't make assumptions about that. And then you're right. The first thing I'm going to say to someone, if it's welcome, let's get to know you. What brings you here, right? How can we help you in your journey? Versus the church is across the street, or is everyone as ugly in this town as you? You know what I mean? Like, are you really Jewish, or should you be here or not? Like that kind of stuff. That's very important. And then I think we do see some of the steps of tshuva in the story, where the rabbi did make a boo-boo, right? I mean, he did insult this guy and then immediately said, oh yeah, like I shouldn't have done that, and then worked hard. I think it's fine that the townsperson was like, it's not so easy. And you didn't insult just me, you insulted the creator of the universe by saying that a human being's ugly and that's all you can say to them. And then we saw the townspeople that came in and said, okay, but the guy's trying, right? And then we saw this rabbi saying, all right, I've learned from it and I'm going to teach it now. It's going to be a part of the Torah that is alive inside of me. So there's a lot of fun parts about the story. And then we get to the end where it says, and we should learn how to soften ourselves. We should learn to make that softness a part of us on a regular basis, because whenever we get stiff, I guess the image it feels to me is it becomes a bit Egypt-like, right? Egypt feels to me stiff and confined and constrained, where softness feels to me like this possibility. And Mickey had his hand up.
But I don't know. Well, I'm from another generation. I'm from the 50s. I sort of grew up in the 50s and the 60s. That older generation where you don't look Jewish, especially Bronx. And my wife, to me, she looks Jewish now. We've been married for more than 50 years, but she's a convert, and she certainly did not look Jewish. One look at her, and that was, she's Jewish or impossible. And I remember our butcher hounded her with it, and it was very, very hurtful to her. And to this day, she is still so sensitive about not looking Jewish, and the hurt that was inflicted upon her, it is really unbelievably. I don't know. It's just really bad. Really bad. The effects have never gone away, even though she's really. She has been more observant than all of our Jewish friends.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't even know why I'm saying it. I guess just to let it out.
Look, I appreciate what you're saying because it's real. It is real, right? Look, you started by saying you were in a different generation where these things were said out loud a lot more than they are today, right? They are said out loud a lot more. And yet today they still persist on some levels, and I don't know what the right word is either, but they can be, well, you said they linger, right? They linger. Like I actually don't call converts, I just call them Jews, right? That's all. Like they were something, but now they're Jews. That's it. They're Jews.
Yeah.
But look, we have this. And maybe this fits in with being stiff like the cedar. like there is this thing in Jewish life where all of us have certain insecurities. And so we kind of look over our shoulder to our left and to our right. And in order to make ourselves feel okay or safe or included, we say those ones aren't, right? Those other Jews aren't, like they're out of the circle. And it still happens today. It like really still happens all the time, where in the conservative movement, we might look to the reform movement and say, those ones aren't the real Jew, right? Like, what's a real Jew? I don't even know. It's like a crazy, crazy conversation. To say that like you would be real or not real because you had an organ or you didn't, you were real or not real because you put on a film like this or like this. And that's certainly how Jewish community has formed in North America. That just can't be how God looks at us. It can't be, right? It just cannot be. Like, so and the soft like the reed is perhaps soft like the reed is perhaps like seeing through God eyes, like godly eyes. Can you see beyond this surface level stuff that separates us? Can you see to somebody's deeper humanity? And when you do that, that sting of what you're saying stays with your wife on some levels, right? You don't get it. You don't get it, because you could even ask that question in a way that's full of care and love and right and shared humanity. You could do that. But that's typically not how it came out, right? It came out where somebody was like putting up defenses and protecting themselves and blocking and doing all the other stuff they did, where they weren't really seeing that's a real human sitting in front of me. And that's the danger in it all. So I think it's a big challenge to ask us, like, can we learn to be soft? Like, can we learn to see through God's eyes and not through the, like, not out of my own fear, not out of my own pain, not out of my own pride, not out of, right? Can we learn to soften ourselves enough to like see this beautiful godly creature right in front of me beyond whatever category that I would put them in when I'm less aware, right? Adam asked a great question in the text. He said, wasn't Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Elazar's Rav his father? And the answer is maybe. Maybe after all those years in the cave along with your dad, I don't know if you ever want to talk to him anymore. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how that goes down. It doesn't tell us, so it's plausible that it is, right? So I really appreciate you putting like real life onto it, because our texts really are about a springboard into having the conversations that matter most in our real lives, not just about something that happened a really long time ago, right? So I was happy to share him with you today. And we'll be careful when we say, is everyone, none of us would do that, but there's a lot of subtle ways that we could be saying, is everyone here as ugly as you, right? There's a lot of subtle ways with our language that if we're not careful, we're kind of going down that road, and this is the time of year to kind of think about that and correct it right where we can. So I'm going to leave you. I'm going to say Shana Tova. I'm going to go have my lunch or my dinner or whatever I'm having now. My dinner.
Shana Tova. Thank you,
Shana
Rabbi.
Tova. Thank you so much for joining me. I love that I got to see you with your mouth and not just your mask. That was one of the reasons we did this, is even because folks that aren't comfortable coming in, like I can't see you or interact with you or that kind of stuff. I know some people are in there in that little box. I'm going like this because there's a box in front of me, but I'm really happy to see your smiles, and I wish you all Shana Tova, really good and sweet year, and the courage to do the work of these days.
Thank you very much, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Take great care. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Shana Tova.
Bye.